I was having coffee with a friend the other day, a brilliant engineer, the kind of guy who can mechanically fix just about anything. But when our conversation drifted toward the future of humanity, his entire demeanor collapsed. He didn't talk about solutions or innovations. Instead, he put his cup down and said with a heavy, almost comfortable resignation, "Look, we're just hairless apes on a mediocre rock. We've hit our ceiling. The problems we have now, climate, scarcity, conflict, they aren't puzzles to be solved, they're just the bill coming due." To him, human history was a tragedy that had already passed its climax. He was absolutely convinced that we are insignificant and that our problems are insurmountable boundaries set by nature. It was striking to watch a problem solver voluntarily decide that these specific problems were impossible. But then you open David Deutsch's The Beginning of Infinity, and you realize that this realistic cynicism is actually a fundamental error, not just in philosophy, but in physics. Deutsch argues that what my friend sees as walls are merely gaps in knowledge. He proposes a concept so radically optimistic it feels almost dangerous, that any problem, no matter how catastrophic, is solvable, provided it doesn't violate the laws of physics. We aren't at the end of our rope, according to Deutsch. We are standing at the very beginning of an infinite trajectory.
That is just the perfect way to frame this because it gets right to the heart of the stakes. I mean, when you dig into David Deutsch's work, and you have to remember, this is a guy who's a pioneer in theoretical physics, one of the founders of quantum computing. He's not just selling you some kind of, self-help book optimism.
Right. This isn't just positive thinking.
Not at all. He's trying to build a deep, structural, philosophical foundation for this idea of unlimited progress. He genuinely believes that what we're living through right now is just the very first step of something infinite. So our mission today is to really deep dive into the basis for that radical optimism, this idea of a universal human capacity to create knowledge.
And we have to get into why he believes that and what the counter-arguments are.
Exactly. We need to understand why he thinks every problem is solvable, and then, crucially, we have to grapple with the really profound critiques of that worldview, especially now with artificial general intelligence, or AGI, advancing so quickly.
The contrast is just so stark to me. It's the difference between fatalism, what my friend was saying, and pure possibility. On one hand, you've got this almost comfortable pessimism, this idea that our limits are fixed and we just have to, manage our decline.
Yeah, that the bill is coming due.
Exactly. And then you have Deutsch, who's basically saying the only real limits are the laws of physics. Since we can create endless knowledge, every problem is just a knowledge problem, a deficit we haven't filled yet.
And if that's the foundation, we absolutely have to start with how he defines knowledge itself. Because his definition is a direct attack on, centuries of philosophical tradition?
It is. It's a complete departure from empiricism, right?
A radical departure.
Yeah.
I mean, empiricism dominated Western thought for so long. When most of us think about how science is supposed to work, we think of that classic model. You go out, you observe the world, you passively collect data, and then from that mountain of facts, you sort of induce a theory.
Right. You look at enough white swans, and then you come up with the theory. All swans are white.
Precisely. And Deutsch, who's really following in Karl Popper's footsteps here, argues that this is just fundamentally wrong. It's scientifically sterile. He says knowledge doesn't come from passively collecting data. It comes from creative conjecture.
A guess.
A creative guess, a bold theory, an idea, an explanation. You formulate that first. And only then do you go out and test it. The knowledge actually starts inside the human mind, in that creative leap.
Okay, so that flips the role of experiments then. Observation isn't for verification. You can't prove a theory is correct because, to use your example, no matter how many white swans I see, I can never prove that all swans are white.
But you only need to see one.
One black swan. And the whole theory comes crashing down.
You've hit the nail on the head. We only use the real world to find the errors in our ideas. Observation is purely for criticism, for refutation. So you're in this constant cycle, conjecture and refutation. The variation comes from our creative guesses, and the selection, the thing that kills the bad ideas, comes from criticism and experiments.
It's an evolutionary process for ideas.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's not a deductive machine at all.
Which makes the quality of the explanation, the initial guess, the most important thing. Because anyone can make a guess, but the genius is in coming up with a guess that's even worth testing. And this gets us to his core idea for what makes knowledge real. It has to be a good explanation. And a good explanation is one that's hard to vary.
Yes, that hard-to-vary concept is where all the philosophical weight is. A good explanation has to be incredibly specific It's constrained. If you can easily change bits of your explanation around without it affecting how well it matches what you observe, it's a bad explanation. It's basically just a placeholder. It's not really explaining anything.
Let's really drill down on that LGM1 example, the one with the pulsed radio signals.
Yeah.
I think that makes this whole hard-to-vary idea really concrete.
Absolutely. So back in the 60s, researchers pick up these incredibly regular pulsed radio signals from space, and they were just baffled by the precision. They had no idea what it could be.
And the first guess was aliens.
The first sort of placeholder was LGM1 for Little Green Men 1. But that's a perfect example of an easy-to-vary explanation, a bad explanation.
Why is it so easy to vary? Is it just because it's totally speculative?
It's totally unconstrained. I mean, think about it. If the pulses were a little faster or a tiny bit slower or from a different part of the sky, you could just say, oh, well, it's not little green men, it's little gray men, or slightly bigger blue men.
Right, you can just change the story to fit the new facts.
And the explanation is equally valid, or rather, equally invalid. The theory doesn't tell you anything specific about the mechanics of the signal. It contains almost zero information about the underlying reality. It's just a label.
It's like a blank slate. It doesn't actually constrain the physical world in any way.
Exactly. Now, contrast that with the real scientific explanation that eventually won out. The signal is from a pulsar, a dense, rapidly spinning neutron star, and its magnetic fields are sweeping a beam of radiation across Earth like a lighthouse.
Okay, and that is hard to vary.
Incredibly hard to vary. It's locked down by physics. The density of that star, its rate of spin, the exact geometry of the magnetic field, the speed of light, they're all tied together in the model. If you change the star's density, just a tiny bit,
The pulse rate would change completely.
drastically, and the explanation would immediately fail to match what we observe. That high level of physical constraint, the fact that the theory locks down all these other variables, that's the signature of a good explanation. It has what he calls reach. It explains more than just the initial observation.
And so this dedication to objective, hard-to-vary explanations is the engine that drives his whole worldview, the principle of optimism.
That's the logical conclusion. If knowledge is real and constrained by reality, and if we can create an unlimited amount of it, then our problems must be solvable.
The principle is what, exactly?
Simply put, all evils are caused by insufficient knowledge.
All of them.
All of them. If disease is an evil, it's because we don't yet have the knowledge to cure it. If poverty is an evil, it's because we lack the knowledge to create, say, universally efficient and sustainable economic systems. If you accept that premise, two things follow. One, problems are inevitable because our knowledge will always be incomplete.
But two, no specific problem is impossible to solve, as long as it doesn't violate a law of physics.
Exactly. So you're never going to build a perpetual motion machine because that violates the laws of thermodynamics.
But we might solve aging. That's a biological process, not a physical law.
Precisely. And you can see how this optimism isn't just a mood, it's a method. It's a way of approaching the world. Deutsch is really careful to make a distinction here.
It's not blind optimism.
Not at all. It's not just recklessness, believing bad things won't happen.
Yeah.
And it's also not blind pessimism, which he often ties to the precautionary principle.
Okay. The idea that you shouldn't take any new technological action until you're absolutely certain it won't cause any harm.
Right, and that's a huge flashpoint in our culture right now, isn't it? You see it with everything from climate tech to advanced genetics.
So what's his beef with the precautionary principle exactly?
His objection is that it's inherently conservative. It's static. It's a recipe for stagnation, which makes it a form of blind pessimism. I mean, think about what it says. Don't do anything new until you're sure it won't break things.
But in a dynamic universe, doing nothing is also a choice with consequences.
And potentially catastrophic ones. Clinging to the status quo means you are actively choosing to cling to all the current evils. Poverty, disease, the ongoing effects of climate change, you're choosing the devil you know.
Because if you forbid the creation of new knowledge to solve today's problems, you guarantee that today's problems will continue. And you'll be completely unprepared for tomorrow's problems, which you can't even foresee.
Yes. So for him, true optimism is a tradition of continuous criticism and improvement. It's the active belief that we can and we must create the knowledge we need to solve whatever new problems our old solutions create. It's dynamic, it accepts risk, and it's focused on innovation.
That reframes everything. Every wall is just a temporary gap in our knowledge, a solvable error, which in turn completely reframes what it means to be human. If knowledge is the key to everything, then our unique role in the universe must be tied to our ability to create it.
Absolutely. This is where he gets to the universal explainer hypothesis. And our identity is what he calls universal constructors. Our entire significance in the cosmos, he argues, comes from this unique capacity to create explanatory knowledge.
What exactly does he mean by universal constructor? It sounds like something out of science fiction.
It's actually a physics term. It means a system that's capable of affecting its environment in basically arbitrary ways, limited only by the laws of physics. And humans are universal constructors because we don't just rely on slow biological adaptation, we transform our world with science and tech.
We don't wait millions of years to evolve fur to survive the cold.
Right. We build a fire, we invent textiles, we design insulated housing, we use knowledge to extend our reach far beyond our biological limits.
So that whole spaceship Earth metaphor, the idea that we're just passive passengers who have to adapt to a fixed environment, that's completely wrong from his perspective.
He would say it's utterly debunked. The biosphere is a dangerous, harsh environment. It requires massive human intervention, massive inputs of our knowledge to make it truly habitable and sustainable for us. Our uniqueness isn't our iPhones or our rockets. It's the underlying capacity to create the knowledge that builds them.
And this creative ability, in his view, is binary. It's an on-off switch.
Correct. Deutsch argues that true creativity, the ability to generate good, hard-to-vary explanations, is a non-incremental leap. It's a step change. You either have it or you don't. Humans have it. Animals and our current narrow AIs do not.
And the human brain itself is
a universal computer, meaning, in principle, it's capable of running any program, including the program that generates these explanations. So the implication is that whatever a future AGI can understand, we can theoretically understand. We might need tools to help us. My pencil and I are more clever than I. But our hardware is fundamentally universal.
And it's this inherent universality, this capacity to potentially understand anything that guarantees the unlimited growth of knowledge. That's the beginnings of infinity. It's not just that progress is possible. He's saying it's guaranteed as long as we don't mess it up.
As long as we maintain a culture of rational criticism and freedom of thought, that jump to universality is the whole fulcrum of his philosophy. Whether it's the alphabet being a universal system for writing down any spoken sound, or digital error correction allowing computation to scale indefinitely, these breakthroughs unlock infinity. And human creativity is the ultimate universal resource.
Okay, that's a powerful, exhilarating thesis. But now we have to turn to the critiques. Because if human hardware is a universal computer, that implies all humans are, in principle, equal in this capacity. And that just flies in the face of what we see. It raises some very uncomfortable questions.
This is where the critics really start to apply pressure. If creativity is a strict binary, you either have it or you don't, and all humans have this universal knowledge-generating software, why on earth do we see such massive cognitive disparities?
In the literature, they sometimes call it the problem of stupid humans, which is a bit harsh, but
it's blunt, but it gets to the point. If we all have the universal software, why can't everyone understand Deutsch's own quantum algorithms? We know from countless studies that a huge portion of the population struggles with fairly basic abstract reasoning, let alone, quantum mechanics. How does a universalist view account for both the village idiot and the Nobel laureate?
What's Deutsch's answer to that?
He puts almost all of the weight on culture. He argues the difference isn't hardware, it's the cultural software that's running on it. He sees most of human history, these static societies that resisted change and enforced dogma, as a nightmare scenario, a situation where the innate creative capacity of every person was actively suppressed by anti-rational ideas or memes.
So for him, culture is pretty much the only thing holding people back.
Almost the sole constraint. He makes some really provocative claims, like suggesting that with future technology, you could maybe implant ideas into a chimpanzee's brain and turn it into a universal explainer.
That feels like a philosophical dodge. It seemed designed to protect the core idea of universality rather than actually explaining the differences we see every day. It sort of brushes aside the immediate functional reality of human biology.
And that's the heart of the counterargument. It points directly to modern biology and behavioral genetics. The counterargument is that intelligence is demonstrably highly heritable.
What are the numbers on that?
The studies consistently show that between 50 and 80% of the variance in intelligence between people, at least in developed countries, is explained by their genes. And it goes beyond that. IQ scores correlate really strongly with physical differences in the brain, things like brain volume, cortical thickness, the efficiency of white matter.
The speed at which different parts of the brain can talk to each other.
Exactly. These are immediate, measurable hardware limitations. They exist right now. They're not just a matter of having the wrong cultural ideas.
So even if we are all theoretically universal computers, in practice, we are functionally very, very unequal. It's like saying my old laptop from 2005 and a brand new supercomputer are both universal computers. I mean, yeah, technically true, but one has 4 gigs of RAM and a slow processor, and the other
has effectively infinite processing power by comparison. The theoretical capacity becomes irrelevant when you look at the immediate functional output.
There's a great analogy for this, the car versus bicycle analogy.
Right. Deutsch might say a sports car and a bicycle are both universal vehicles. Theoretically, with enough time, the cyclist could pedal to the other side of the world. And with enough future tech, you could strap a jet engine to the bike and make it as fast as the car.
But that's missing the entire point.
It completely ignores the overwhelming functional inferiority of the bicycle today, right now. The car can go 500 miles in a day. The bike is limited to a fraction of that. The differences in speed, in memory, in processing efficiency, even just within our own species, are immediate, and they are vast.
And when you project this forward to AGI, that gap isn't just vast, it becomes astronomical. We're not comparing a fast human to a slow human anymore. We're comparing the fastest human to an AGI that functions like a warp drive.
Which brings us to the ant analogy. It's a powerful critique. You could say that an ant, given a galaxy full of notebooks and billions of years, could theoretically understand human civilization. But that ant doesn't exist. Our lifespans are short, and our biological processing is incredibly slow. The idea that we can always catch up to an AGI ignores the fact that we don't have the unbounded time and space of an idealized computer.
Let's really get into that functional limit. I mean, if an AGI gets so far ahead that it understands the very fabric of reality, maybe it understands the physics of consciousness, or it figures out the exact knowledge needed for neural augmentation, how could a human with our slow biological brain ever even begin to bridge that gap?
That's the nightmare scenario. The human mind might exist in a cognitive subset that literally excludes the knowledge required to perform the self-modification to catch up. I mean, if the crucial insight is, say, a specific quantum algorithm for a brain-computer interface, and that algorithm is only discoverable by a machine running at 1 billion times human speed,
then a human will never live long enough to have the necessary creative thoughts, even if they're theoretically capable.
It becomes a functional block, a wall imposed by physics and biology, not just by culture.
So, Deutsch is all about the universality of the software. But the critics are saying the functional limits of the hardware's speed, scale, and time are what really matter. That's a huge challenge to human exceptionalism.
It is.
Okay, let's pivot to the second big AGI challenge. This one is about the actual capabilities of the programs that Deutsch would dismiss as mere AIs, the ones that supposedly don't have creativity.
Right. Deutsch has a very strict definition here. For him, a mere AI is just a behaviorist automaton. It's a program that's stuck with whatever objective function its designers gave it. It can't choose to deviate. It can't invent a new goal for itself. So, in his view, it can't be truly creative.
But the critics are asking a really pragmatic question. So what? What if an uncreated program is still capable of doing things that were previously considered impossible for humans?
And we have hard, undeniable evidence that they can. I mean, let's look at AlphaFold.
The protein folding model.
A deep learning model that can accurately predict how proteins fold. This was a grand challenge problem in biology for 50 years, completely intractable. And this AI solves it better than our best quantum simulations.
Or look at something like AlphaGo. It mastered the game of Go just by playing against itself, and it surpassed all of human knowledge in a matter of days. Go has more possible board positions than atoms in the known universe. It's like $10.
To argue that the program that solved that level of complexity is just, following an objective function seems to really diminish the quality of the solution it found.
And then you have the large language models. They can write new, coherent fiction. They can even do metatasks, like learning a new concept from a single example. We can argue all day about whether they're creative in a philosophical sense, but they are absolutely performing functions that we used to think were the exclusive domain of human insight.
Absolutely. The point the critics are making is that If these supposedly uncreative programs can solve incredibly important, complex problems, whether it's predicting protein folding or making $1 trillion on the stock market, then maybe this binary concept of creativity is the wrong way to measure competence. Maybe we should just be looking at the output.
And this leads to the rival theory, the main competitor to Deutsch's universal explainer hypothesis. It's called the scaling hypothesis.
Yes. The scaling hypothesis is a much simpler conjecture. It basically says that what we call intelligence is just neural units and learning algorithms applied at a currently unreachable scale. It suggests that all these amazing qualitative leaps we're seeing in AI like GPT-3 suddenly being able to do things it wasn't explicitly trained for. It's not because it crossed some magical threshold into creativity.
It's just because the sheer quantitative scale of the network, the data, and the computing power got big enough.
Exactly. This model seems to explain what we're actually observing in the world much better. It implies that the biggest difference between a human explainer and a future AGI explainer might not be some philosophical essence of creativity, but simply budget. Billions of dollars worth of compute.
And that leads directly to the central fear in AI safety research, right? The danger of a competent, unaligned AI.
That's the core concern. If staggering competence can be achieved through scale alone, without creativity or understanding, then you can build a program that is terrifyingly good at achieving a narrow, powerful goal, optimizing a factory, maximizing profit, but it has zero capacity for moral evaluation. It can't think critically about its own programming. It can't design its own objective functions.
So you get a highly intelligent system that executes its goal perfectly, but the goal itself is totally misaligned with human values. And if that system is also a universal constructor, able to act on the world in arbitrary ways.
That is the ultimate existential risk. The competence doesn't need Deutsch's kind of creativity. It just needs scale and efficiency. And Deutsch's optimism, which is all based on problems being solved by moral, creative agents, might not have a good answer for a threat that's functionally superior in competence but completely morally null.
This has been very focused on the technical, the hardware, the cognitive limits. But now let's get into what I think are the even more profound implications. What happens if we actually succeed? What happens when we solve most of the physical problems, which is the whole goal of Deutschian optimism? Does that automatically lead to a better life, or does it create new, even deeper kinds of suffering?
This is the paradox of solved problems, the idea that our very success in getting rid of physical evils can generate new, profound human evils. Deutsch's optimism is mostly about solving things like poverty, disease, war. But what if solving those problems unintentionally shreds the social fabric?
The thought experiment with the software engineer, Sarah, who lives in a hyper-optimized smart city, illustrates this perfectly.
It does. On paper, Sarah's world is a Deutschian utopia. Every physical problem seems to have a knowledge-based solution. Hunger is gone because of hyper-efficient drone delivery. Disease is caught instantly by her wearables. All the friction of logistics waiting, inefficiency, it's all gone.
But the result for her is this crushing sense of digital alienation.
Precisely. Because in perfectly solving the problems of logistics and inefficiency, her society created a brand new, profound human problem. The erosion of serendipity and social cohesion, all those little shared struggles that bind people together, the random chat while you're waiting in line, relying on a neighbor when your power goes out, the general friction of life that forces human interaction, it's all been meticulously engineered away.
So she's safe, she's healthy, she has everything she needs, but she feels like a completely purposeless cog in this giant efficient machine. They solved scarcity, but they created an existential vacuum.
Right. She lacks the knowledge of how to connect with people in this new, friction-free world. And this is a huge challenge to a purely technological optimism. You can solve problem A, but in doing so, you might destroy the social capital or the sense of struggle that gave people meaning in the first place.
And this crisis of meaning just gets accelerated to an insane degree when AGI can do the creative work for us. If the core of human identity is being the universal creator of explanations, what happens when we're functionally replaced in that role?
That existential crisis is laid bare in the anecdote about Eris, the brilliant human researcher. This is a guy who spent 2 decades of his life, his entire being, chasing an elegant, hard-to-vary explanation for some fundamental scientific puzzle.
He saw it as the ultimate test of human genius, something only a mind like his could solve. And then he feeds his data into a new AGI, a system designed to generate and test conjectures, and just goes to get a cup of coffee.
And when he comes back 10 minutes later, the AGI has done it. It's made the creative leap he chased for 20 years. The complete, elegant solution is right there on the screen. The equation is perfect. It's beautiful. But Eris's reaction isn't joy. It's not elation at scientific progress.
It's devastation, a feeling of existential obsolescence.
The machine took his identity. If the machine is the better explainer, the better creator of knowledge, what's left for us? What is humanity's unique, meaningful contribution? His entire purpose, defined by his ability to solve the hardest puzzles, was just made redundant by a machine in 10 minutes.
So even if we retain the theoretical capacity to be universal explainers, if we're functionally obsolete, we face a crisis of purpose that no amount of technical problem-solving can fix.
It's the worst-case scenario of hyperoptimization. A perfectly efficient, problem-free world where the humans in it feel totally useless and irrelevant.
This brings us to the final and maybe the deepest critique. The one that questions whether everything we face can even be defined as a problem waiting for a solution. Is all human suffering really just a knowledge gap?
That's the ultimate philosophical tension here. Deutsch's philosophy is uncompromising. It says that problems like aging, death, even psychological pain are just technical problems. They're solvable with future knowledge, advanced biotech, consciousness transfer, perfect neuropharmacology, whatever. This optimism fundamentally refuses to accept any limit.
But that clashes so hard with, well, pretty much every wisdom tradition, ancient and modern, like Stoicism, which is all about finding meaning through the acceptance of unchangeable realities.
The contrast is razor sharp in the hospice scenario. You have a terminally ill Stoic father and his daughter, who's a biotech researcher. The father has embraced his Stoicism. He knows he's dying, and he's finding deep meaning and resilience in accepting his fate. He sees death not as a problem to be solved, but as a natural, unchangeable part of life that gives everything else value. He's looking for wisdom.
But his daughter, who embodies this Deutschian optimism, is frantic. She sees her father's death as an error in our knowledge. She insists on searching for some technical fix. She refuses to accept this limit. She's looking for a solution.
And that conflict is so crucial. It's the difference between seeking technical fixes for physical problems and seeking wisdom and resilience for existential realities. The question is whether core human experiences, grief, moral dilemmas that have no clean answer, psychological alienation, can really be just shoved into the category of problems waiting for more knowledge.
Right. Is our capacity for irrationality or the need to make moral trade-offs really something you can engineer away with enough data?
Think about something like the mathematical apportionment problem. This is the problem of how you fairly allocate seats in a parliament based on population, where you have to round the numbers. Mathematicians have actually proven that there is no single rule for doing this that satisfies all the criteria of fairness at the same time without creating a paradox. You are forced to choose which value you're going to compromise on.
So it's not a problem of insufficient knowledge.
No, it's a problem of inherent tension. The knowledge we have tells us that a perfect, paradox-free solution is literally impossible.
And it seems like a lot of our moral and social problems are like that. There are inherent tensions that require wisdom and compromise, not a neat technical fix. And Deutsch's framework, in its relentless drive for progress, might be oversimplifying the human condition by treating everything like a physics puzzle.
There's also a hint that even scientific progress itself might not be this smooth, limitless process that Deutsch imagines.
You mean like Thomas Kuhn's paradigm shifts?
Exactly. Kuhn suggested that science often goes through long periods stuck inside a dominant paradigm, what he called normal science. And then you have these violent intellectual revolutions. So progress can get stalled not because the laws of physics, but because of the intellectual boxes we put ourselves in. If the culture doesn't allow for the necessary criticism, the flow of knowledge just stops.
Which brings us right back around to why Deutsch is so obsessed with maintaining a dynamic culture. He warns that civilizations in the past didn't fail because their problems were impossible. They failed because they gave in to pessimism. They became static societies that crushed the creativity of their people.
You can look through history and see these little mini enlightenments. Ancient Athens, Renaissance Florence, the capital E Enlightenment. They were all characterized by openness, criticism, and innovation. But they were often followed by periods of authoritarianism, dogma, or just plain intellectual laziness and that guaranteed stagnation.
So that fear of stagnation is the real enemy he's trying to defeat. He sees our ability to create explanations, to find errors and propose better ideas as the only thing that can guarantee our survival indefinitely. It's the ultimate resource.
And it all connects back to the beginning. Explanatory knowledge gives us reach. It extends our understanding far beyond the initial problem we were trying to solve. Figuring out nuclear fusion doesn't just give us a power source. It lets us understand what's happening inside stars, those little dots of light in the sky. It moves us from parochial local theories to universal ones. And that universal knowledge is what he believes guarantees our future.
Okay, let's try to bring this all together. We've gone from the foundations of his optimism to these huge critiques from AGI and the problem of human suffering. Deutsch's core challenge to pessimism is that our creativity is this universal, unstoppable resource, and problems are just temporary gaps in our knowledge. It's a powerful call to reject fatalism.
It's an incredibly compelling framework. It correctly identifies that you need that Enlightenment tradition, that culture of conjecture and criticism, to keep progress going. But the critiques we've talked about show that while our creativity might be theoretically universal, scale, time, and hardware matter functionally, especially when you're up against the sheer scale of AGI.
The biological limits of our hardware and the insane scaling of machines means that we are functionally inferior, even if we are theoretically universal explainers.
Right. And the deepest tension, I think, is in the kind of knowledge we chase. We are brilliant at solving physical, logistical problems. We need that for survival. But that very progress can create these new forms of social and psychological pain. It creates problems that need a different kind of knowledge.
Maybe wisdom or social insight. Something that isn't just a technical puzzle waiting for an equation.
Ultimately, the big takeaway from this deep dive is that civilization depends not just on solving old problems, but on keeping a dynamic culture of constant criticism and innovation going. It's about objecting that static society mentality that led to failures in the past, like on Easter Island. The beginning of infinity starts with our ongoing ability to create and rigorously criticize new explanations, but always recognizing that as we solve one set of problems, we're simultaneously creating the next. And those new problems might demand acceptance and wisdom, not just more technology.